Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Massive thanks to the authors, Roxi2Star and ThatOneZed for allowing me to adapt their awesome story. Follow the link in the description to check out more of their works. Today we will be listening to the 9th part of What If Deku Had Both One for All and All for One. If you enjoy, please consider liking, commenting and subscribing down below, and don't forget to hit that bell icon so you get notified when videos go live. Now, without further ado, let's get into the video. Chapter 18, He Was Deku, Damn It. Chapter by Roxi2Star. The week flew by. Next thing he knew, he was standing on the train platform with the rest of his classmates, all holding their bags and hero suitcases for the next week. He just received the fixed version yesterday, and he was very excited to try it on. Yurika had just departed for Gunhead's agency, leaving Izuku to stand with Todoroki and Ida. All week, he'd been trying to talk to Ida about what happened. He was worried. Ida loved his older brother, and acting like he wasn't fazed that the man had been paralyzed and forced into retirement was not healthy. Not to mention Ida was going to be doing his hero internship in Hosu, the exact place his brother had been viciously attacked by the hero killer Stain. Everything about it seemed wrong to Izuku. Ida's train was going to be pulling up any minute now. He had to say something. "Hey, Ida-kun," Izuku said gently, placing a hand on his arm. "Are you going to be okay in Hosu?" Ida blinked, looking down at him. He forced a smile onto his face. "Of course I will, Midoriya-kun. I appreciate your concern, but I can assure you it's unwarranted," he said easily. "We're friends, you know that, right?" Izuku asked. "You can talk to me about anything. I'm always here to listen, so please don't feel like you can't." "Midoriya, drop it," Ida snapped. Todoroki bristled on Izuku's other side. "He's just concerned. There's no need to yell at him like that," he said coldly. He and Ida glared at each other over Izuku's head. "This doesn't concern either one of you. I am fine. I have been saying that for days, so please stop putting your noses in my family business, and believe me when I say how I feel. Even if I had a problem, it still would have nothing to do with either of you," Ida said. His train arrived. "I have to go," he forced a smile back onto his face. "Thank you for worrying, but please stop it. I'll see you two next week. I look forward to hearing about your internships." With that, Ida left, leaving Izuku and Todoroki alone on the platform. "Maybe he's right," Izuku said softly. "It's his family, so I thought sticking your nose where it doesn't belong is part of being a hero." Todoroki asked. Izuku looked up at him, eyes wide. "He wants to do something stupid." He motioned toward Ida's train. "I don't think him going to Hosu is a coincidence." "So he wasn't the only one who thought that then?" "Yeah. Me either. Do you think we should tell someone? If we do, he'll be pulled from his internship. However, he will be with a pro hero, so it's doubtful he'll be able to sneak away and do something. Aizawa-sensei did sign off on him going after all, and he's not stupid. He's probably put together what we have. We should trust the pros to take care of Ida this week. Maybe next week he'll be more willing to talk to you." "You're right, Todoroki-kun." He smiled up at him. "That actually makes me feel a lot better, thank you." Todoroki flushed, looking away. "Speaking of talking, are you sure you're gonna be okay? Last chance to back out." He shook his head. "No. I'm doing this. I've lived my entire life with that human garbage. I can handle a week. It's really not a big deal. He might even be more forgiving since I chose him, and will be around his sidekicks most of the time." Izuku grabbed his arm gently, giving it a squeeze. "Okay. Text me though. If you want to vent after a long day or anything, really. Don't hesitate. I'll be right there if you need me." Todoroki nodded. "I know. Same to you. That's my train. I'll see you next week, Midoriya," he said, and with a small wave, he left for his train. Izuku smiled back at him, watching his form walk away. His heart felt light. "Same to you." Izuku looked down at the GPS on his phone, then back up at the building before him. It was in shambles. This was Grand Tornino's hero agency? There had to be a mistake. Sure, the guy had been in retirement until now, but this was way too run down to even be considered a house in the first place. He went to knock on the door but found it slightly ajar. He frowned, pushing it open. Hello. He called into the room. In the center of the room, an old man lay in what looked like a puddle of his own blood. For a brief moment, fear seized in his chest. His nose prepared for the onslaught of metallic death weight that was ketchup. Why does it smell like ketchup? Oh, because he's lying in a puddle of ketchup. Was this a prank? What the hell kind of hero did All Might send him to? Gran Torino. He called, "Did you slip in that ketchup?" Yeah, that was it. He must have been making hot dogs or something. Oh yep, there were sausage links all over the ground. He must have been preparing them lunch. That was sweet. I'm alive. The old man said, slowly pulling himself up on his cane. He looked tiny and feeble. His entire body shook, though something about it seemed off. Izuku quickly scanned him over. The cane looked well used, but his costume fit him pretty perfectly. That meant he'd been wearing it recently. His body wobbled, sure, but something about it felt practiced. I slipped and spilled lunch. His eyes glanced up at Izuku. And yep, there was the confirmation he needed. His gaze was sharp, as if it was dissecting him down to the core. Izuku suppressed a shiver. Who are you? I'm Midoriya Izuku, he said, approaching him and gently placing his briefcase down. You're Gran Torino, right? He wanted him to confirm who he was before talking about sensitive subjects. Who are you? He asked again, before adding, Toshinori. Yagi-san. Izuku asked right back, so you are Gran Torino then? I don't understand what you're doing. Is this a bit? A practical joke? I can tell you're not as feeble as you're trying to look. The old man stood up straighter, and Izuku felt like he passed some kind of test. Ah, good, you're smarter than you look, he said, simply opening up Izuku's hero briefcase. You've already got that going for you more than Toshinori did at your age. He had a great physique, but I had to beat common sense into him. He looked over the costume in the case. Then again, with your father being who he is, it's not surprising you inherited his intelligence. You have his quirk as well, don't you? I do. That won't be a problem, will it? Izuku asked. I really need to learn how to handle one for all better, and you're the only person who can help. He waved him off. How I feel about it is irrelevant. Get this on. I want to see what I'm working with. He turned and walked towards the kitchen. Be ready. Izuku nodded and took his briefcase into the bathroom. He began to pull it out of the case and noticed it was slightly altered. It was pretty similar to what it had been before, but the base was not black. Instead, it was a very dark green. It could easily be mistaken for black in the right lighting. The green panels and elbow and knee pads were brighter. His metal soles to his shoes were lighter and also darker toned, seemingly made of a new alloy to help him move faster. His fingerless gloves were thicker, and more reinforced to help keep his arms safe. The biggest change, however, was on the back. Right at the small of his back, sat a fluff of green. A tail. He couldn't believe this. His traitor father. He dressed himself and took in his appearance. With his hood up, he looked more like a rabbit than ever. He pulled out his phone and used the mirror to take a quick picture over his shoulder of the tail. He texted it to Todoroki. I hope you're happy, jerk. He put his phone away and exited the bathroom. I'm ready. Pain erupted in the left side of his head. He ducked, though not fast enough. A yellow boot connected with the left side of his face, knocking him down. He quickly shot up, a yellow blur bouncing off the walls with alarming speed. More pain, but this time in the back of his head, at the base of his skull. Full cowling activated on reflex. Izuku turned, a high kick arching up behind him. He wasn't sure if he made contact with Gran Torino or not, but he did at least force him to change directions. Gran was now in front of him, grinning. Oh, you're not so bad, he said. You have some control and good reflexes. We might make a hero of you yet. Do you just want to see one for all or everything I have? Izuku asked, putting himself in a fighting stance. Gran Torino grinned. Let's see it all. I want to know all the tricks hiding in that fur of yours, rabbit. Izuku flushed. Hey. I lost a bet apparently, we're not talking about the tail. Gran Torino began to bounce around the room again. He was so fast Izuku couldn't track him. But his mystery headache could apparently. Pain flashed in his right temple, and he instinctively summoned shield, blocking the hit. Gran Torino simply bounced off it, back to the walls. More pain, throbbing between his eyes. He blocked that hit as well, more pain behind him, He turned, a right hook ready pain in his left and another hit. Izuku was sent to the ground with a groan of pain. That's interesting. You're not tracking my movement but you seem to know where I'm going to hit. How many quirks do you have right now? He asked. Izuku sat up slowly, rubbing his head including all for one and one for all, 4. I have my shield and pull, he said, pulling Gran Torino closer to him. He poked hard in his head. That can't be all, he said, you're doing something. Or something is happening to you. How do you know where my attacks are coming from? I don't. Izuku said before it clicked. Well, I mean I have a migraine right now and the pain, oh my god, the pain is where the hit is coming from. Just like at the USJ. Every time I had those head pains it was right before I was attacked. What the hell? He mumbled, that shouldn't be possible though. I never picked up a quirk like that. Gran Torino was quiet. He hummed, stroking his chin. Kid, that sounds a lot like Danger Sense. He looked up at that. What's Danger Sense? It's a quirk. It belonged to the 4th user of One for All, he said simply. Though why you have it I can't say. One for All is a mysterious quirk. And mixing it with its brother quirk. Well, it's bound to have some crazy reactions. Like, maybe powering up the other quirks introduced to it. Izuku asked. That could be a potential outcome, yes, he said. Is that happening? Izuku nods. I took 2 quirks and gave them back. First my teacher's. It was a life or death situation. I took his quirk and returned it but now it's stronger. But so is the backlash. The same goes for my friend. After I returned his quirk to him it became more volatile and much more powerful. One for All is a quirk built to cultivate and release power. It's entirely possible that any quirk you introduce to it will have its power and backlash increased. This could be potentially devastating. That was something that had crossed his mind before. Taking any quirk was suddenly a gamble. Would he be able to survive if a quirk had a backlash? Using all for one wasn't just a matter of moral responsibility but physical now as well. Misuse of it could potentially damage himself or others. It already has. Aizawa and Todoroki had to relearn how to use their quirks and their harsher backlashes. He'd never use all for one on a friend again. And only on villains if his life depended on it. Pain flooded the left side of his head. He threw up his shield as Gran Torino collided with it. Enough thinking, boy. He yelled, you still haven't impressed me yet. Right. Toshinori felt like he was going to be sick. Tsukachi had just left his office, and what he said had left Toshinori reeling. Nomu, it'd been the result of some sort of awful experiment. Left brain dead, a simple puppet of strength meant to be a container for multiple quirks. Quirks he must have gotten from a quirk that gives quirks. It was impossible. But yet, Izuku was ruled out in his mind at once. Hisashi as well. There was no way either of them could be behind this. Toshinori had known them for the better part of 4 years. It was impossible that they could be working with the League. He saw them too much and knew them too deeply. That only left one person but he was dead. He saw it. Then again. Hisashi was here. He walked to Hisashi's office and came in without knocking. Hisashi was at his desk, deep in some work as he scribbled away at his notebook. Friendly red eyes looked up, a smile on his face growing upon seeing who it was. Hey Tosh, he said, need something? Toshinori closed the door behind him. Hisashi. I just got some awful news, he said. Nomu. The villain from the USJ. He had multiple quirks. This and the name Shigaraki that their leader bore. Yeah, Hisashi said softly. I had a feeling it was something like this. He stood from his desk. So part of me? He's still out there then? This confirms it. He nodded. I thought it was impossible but, here you are. He motioned to Hisashi. You said the quirk that got you in this predicament was one that split you up and scattered your memories, right? So it's entirely possible to form 2 or more separate beings. That's right. I just happen to have more positive memories. It stands to reason then, that my more unsavory ones are still out there. I certainly had enough life-extending and healing quirks to survive just about any fight with the right help. Hisashi had his eyes screwed shut. I think. I have a vague memory of an older man in a lab coat. I can't remember his face but I had so much money and so many resources it's very possible all for one has survived this long. Toshinori sat in the nearest chair. I'm so sorry, he said. What? Toshinori, no, it's not your fault. If anything, it's mine. I'm the supervillain here. Hisashi moved around the desk, kneeling in front of him. One of his warm hands lay over Toshinori's long and skeletal ones. You aren't, Toshinori said firmly. Don't say that about yourself. He reached his other hand and moved a white strand of hair out of Hisashi's face. Nothing about you is villainous. This is my fault. All for One is my enemy. He was my duty. I see I failed. He's still out there, and once he learns I've passed One for All on, if he hasn't already, he's going to turn to Izuku. He'll be his target. Something occurred to Toshinori. You have all the memories of Izuku and Inko, don't you? Pretty sure I do. I remember meeting Inko, and I think all of our dates. I remember when she told me she was pregnant. I remember Izuku's birth. I visited once when I could. He was a toddler at the time. Maybe 1 or 2. There's a picture around someplace. But I never saw him after that. Not once. Inko and I exchanged letters. She sent a few pictures, but I never kept them. It was too dangerous for them. If anyone knew I had a weakness, their lives would have been in danger. I burned every letter and picture I ever got. So, it's unlikely All for One knows who they are at all. That's a relief at least, he said. What about you? I don't know, he said. I remember stealing the quirk that created me. I remember thinking about it a few times before I used it. When I emerged, I saw the other body. The bits I left behind. I thought he was dead. His face was shivered. It was an awful sight. I ran from the battlefield and I wasn't seen by anyone. I'd say he doesn't remember me at all. What he will know is he's missing memories. I have plenty of half memories. Places where things just stop or black out. He paused. But he might chalk that up to brain damage from your fight with him. Toshinori frowned deeper. He cupped Hisashi's face. I'm so sorry, he repeated. Hisashi leaned into his hand. It's okay. We both thought he was gone. I won't lie. I'm terrified of what he'll do once he learns about Izu. Even more so if he were to figure out he was his son, he sighed. I hate to say it, but he is just as much Izuku's father as I am. Not true, Toshinori said. You were the one who raised him. The one who comforted his nightmares, fed him, taught him, loved him. You are his father, you. Midoriya Hisashi. All for One might share his DNA, but that is meaningless when it comes to family ties. The smile Hisashi gave him made his heart stop for a moment. It was so bright, and yet so soft. He held Toshinori's hand to his face gently. You're his family too, you know that, right? He asked. Me? He nodded yes. You are. You've stepped up in so many ways, Tosh. I honestly don't think I could have gotten Izu to where he is now without you. He met his eyes. I don't think I've ever really thanked you for that. So, thank you, Toshinori. I didn't. But you did, he said softly. You're his dad too. In all the ways that matter, I've thought that for a long time. You're his family. You're mine too. Toshinori didn't know what to say. His voice failed him. Hisashi, he broke off. He felt warm. A deep warmth in the pit of his stomach. You're his dad too. You're mine. Those words felt heavy, but they made him happier than he'd been in years. We're going to be okay, he said. Even if he's out there. You, me, and Izu. We're going to stick together. None of us have to take him on alone. He was right. Hisashi usually was. They would face this together. As a family. By nightfall, Izuku felt like his body had been put through a meat grinder. He was sore from the kicks, his brain felt like it was melting, and his nose hadn't stopped bleeding. Gran Torino had kept him on his toes, making him switch back and forth between all his different quirks. It made everything hurt. Not to mention he apparently had another quirk? Danger Sense it was called. Why did he have Danger Sense? Where did it come from? He sat up from his spot on the couch. The sports festival. The vestiges. He's been using my quirk. That must have been the fourth user. They had spoken to him, they knew he had Danger Sense. He wished he could talk to them again. Shinsu's quirk did something that triggered them. After this week of internships, he should track him down and ask him to use his quirk on him again. Maybe it would get him back in that headspace. He grabbed his phone to text the family group chat and noticed a backlog of notifications. He hadn't had a chance to check his phone all day. He had a text from Todoroki. He cocked his head, opening the message. His heart leapt into his throat. "I like the bunny tail. It suits you." He liked it. Was this him making fun of him or flirting? God, it was so hard to tell with Todoroki, especially because Izuku was hyper-aware of his growing infatuation with him. Dad could wait 5 minutes. Flirting with Todoroki was important. "I don't mind it as much as I thought I would. Gran Torino made fun of me a little bit and I think everyone else is gonna make fun of me. But I'm just gonna own it. It's super soft too. You should feel it when we get back to classes." There we go. Friendly enough but with an implication. That's what flirting was all about. The implication. Back to work. He pulled up the family group chat, texting them about his day as well as his and Gran Torino's discovery of danger sense. Dad texted back first, "Oh man, a quirk to help keep you out of trouble. That's amazing, Izu. It sounds like it's a passive quirk. I wonder if you can train it. What kind of threats does it perceive? Physical only or can it help with other kinds? What about only perceived threats? Stuff that won't actually hurt you but your brain thinks it will. What a fascinating quirk." Yagi replied not too much later, "You have a quirk of a previous user? Interesting, that implies that One for All is absorbing their quirks. It would make sense, with the original user being your uncle. Though I wonder why you're the one who gets to use them. Neither myself nor Nana could, and I don't believe her mentor could either. Is it because you have All for One, making you capable of holding more than a few quirks at a time?" He texted them back and forth for a while. All of them throwing out theories. Mixing All for One and One for All definitely had some strange outcomes. He wished them both good night, getting ready to lay back down on the couch for shut-eye when his phone beeped one last time. Another message from Todoroki. "I look forward to it. Rabbit." Izuku flushed. Todoroki really could just do things to him. Ugh, fine. If he wants to flirt like that, Izuku would just fire back. Is that a term of endearment? Rabbit is cute but you might wanna try something sweeter like bunny. Everyone is probably gonna harass me about it at school and try to touch it. But you get the first squeeze. Then, to just be a little shit, he added. "Tiger, winky face, take that pretty boy." He replied almost at once. "In what way am I a tiger? You at least dress like a rabbit." Izuku grinned. "You're kind of like a cat, you know? You're standoffish and hiss when you don't know someone, then you get comfortable and you're actually very sweet. But you're big and strong so you're a big cat. And tigers are my favorite big cats. Plus, while they're super strong they can also be big babies. Maybe you should add stripes to your hero costume." This was flirting, right? He hoped. "If you defeat me at the sports festival next year, I'll consider it. It's very late. You should be sleeping." He rolled his eyes. It was pretty late, he should get to bed. "You too. Good night, Tiger." His reply was instant. "Good night, Bunny." Izuku felt his entire face heat up. He pulled his phone close to his chest, a small squeal of delight breaking through his lips. This had to be flirting. It had to be. Right? Oh God, would Todoroki call him Bunny in person? He didn't think he'd be able to handle that. He could barely handle it in text form. Maybe if they were alone? Eventually, he drifted to sleep, smiling. He deflected another kick. It hurt. He wished he were stronger. This was so frustrating. Gran Torino bounced off the walls, nearly crashing into Izuku again. He used full cowling to dodge, throwing himself over the couch. Gran rushed him, and Izuku actually managed to graze his cheek with the sole of his shoe. Gran landed. "Not too bad, kid," he said grinning, "you're learning pretty fast." "Not fast enough," Izuku said, standing up straight, "I still can barely push past 5%. Why do you think you're not able to do it?" Izuku blinked. "Because my body can't handle it. Just going to 6% hurts. I mean I'm not breaking anything, but it feels like one wrong move and I'll..." "You're afraid," Gran Torino said. "Of the pain. You are not pushing because you're expecting the backlash. It's like you're trying to pet a dog that you think is going to bite you. You're so tense that it will hurt you. Maybe have a little more trust in One for All." he asked. He blinked. What do you mean, trust? Gran huffed. Trust. You trust Pole and Shield. Don't you? He did. Shield came to him easily. It was the first quirk he'd ever taken on purpose. It had come and obeyed him, to put it in Gran's words, like a dog accepting a new master. Shield always felt eager to please. And Pole was his mother's. It felt like her helping him. Danger Sense was an interesting case, since he didn't even know he had it until yesterday. But it was something he inherently trusted. It activated all on its own and kept him safe. He's pretty sure it's already saved his life. He could even go so far as to say he trusted All for One. As evil as the quirk is, it never failed him. It was him. Yet, he feared what using All for One meant, but actually using it was as easy as breathing. One for All, on the other hand, it was All Might's quirk. Something he'd been entrusted with. A gift. Something he couldn't afford to fuck up. He'd already destroyed his arms with it, so he wasn't off to a great start. One for All hurts him. It hurts to use, even at 5% sometimes. But it was so important. Izuku starts. How do I trust One for All more? That's for you to figure out, kid, he said. Take a break. I'm gonna make some food. He walked to the kitchen to prepare himself lunch. Izuku sat on the couch, watching him. How do you trust a quirk? Was it something he'd just have to do? He closed his eyes, his mind slipping into the void. All for One was like standing in the center of a black tornado, the swirl of colors around him both beautiful and scary. Pole flitted across his cheek, as friendly as a mother's kiss, ever comforting. Shield of course was close by, ready to go. And Danger Sense had made itself known. He could feel it now that he was aware. Ever present, yet invisible. And One for All crackled in the air around him. It was scary. It hurt him before. He remembered the first punch he ever threw. It had been so painful he'd thrown up. Izuku had blacked out entirely. Dad hadn't been happy either. Yagi had been scared for him. The entire experience was traumatizing, but there was that split second right as he first swung his fist. That glorious moment of happiness. Before he felt his arm shatter. He had been so powerful, his entire body singing with an energy that was all his. He examined it in his core again. Where Izuku once felt only unyielding pressure from One for All, it felt different this time. More like a weighted blanket. Izuku stood, full cowling, crackling in his body. 5%. 6. 10. The fear was there. He remembered what Gran had said, dogs could sense your emotions. He couldn't be afraid. 10% wouldn't hurt him. He had to tell himself that. He could do this. He was Deku, damn it. I can. He yelled before he jumped at Gran, who had turned to face him the second he heard his voice. Gran Torino nearly didn't get out of the way. Izuku's leg crashed into the microwave he'd just loaded. It smashed into pieces. He took a swing at Gran, barely clipping his chin. Gran jumped back before flying off the walls, trying to go for the same strategy as before. This time though, Izuku caught him by the leg as he passed and threw him onto the ground. He didn't stay there for long though, using his jets to blast out between Izuku's feet and back to the wall. Izuku had to use shield as pain flared up on his right side. He dropped it, using Pole to bring Gran back into his range, and landing a punch on his chest. It sent Gran Torino back into the wall, almost cracking it. He fell back to his legs, coughing slightly. Now that's more like it. Izuku grinned, letting full cowling down. 10%, he said. Gran smiled widely at him. It was full of teeth, but this time, it filled Izuku with excitement. You are going to be a monster someday. Chapter 19, The Hero Killer Stain. Chapter by Roxi2Star. To say Xiaotou was having a bad week was an understatement. Spending every day with Endeavor, especially after seeing what freedom felt like, was a nightmare. At the very least the training had been easier than it had been in the past. They'd spent most of their nights patrolling in Hosu, and their days back at the Endeavor Agency, a place Xiaotou didn't actually hate all that much. While his father may be his father, his employees were good people. Vernon in particular was a kind person, despite her overzealous personality. While on some level he hated how much they revered his father, he also knew that they didn't know. He was pretty sure if word got out about the person his father could be behind closed doors, they would straight up quit. He was also certain that was why his father never allowed any of them to be alone with him. Back to his week. Between the late night patrols and the daytime training, he was feeling run down. The only bright spot in his day was coming home to pull his phone out of his back pocket for a few minutes to text Midoriya. Shoto had denied himself friends for so long, and he couldn't see why he'd ever thought that they would be burdens on him. Midoriya was wonderful. He was funny, and he cared about Shoto's day. He would listen. Even if texting him nearly gave him a heart attack on the first day of the internships. His phone had gone off while his father was ranting about something or other. To be perfectly honest, Shoto hadn't been listening. His father was facing away from him, so he chanced to look. A message from Midoriya. An image. He opened the message and nearly dropped his phone. He fumbled for it quietly before grabbing his phone with both hands and bringing it up to his face so close his nose was almost pressed against the glass. Midoriya was wearing his hero costume, clearly in some bathroom. It was a mirror selfie, taken over his shoulder. One of his legs was lifted slightly, making his hip pop out a bit. It made his waist look smaller and his hips look wider. Not to mention his butt. Plump and round. And oh god. Right there, above God's gift to mankind of a butt was it. The thing that would put Todoroki Shoto in the ground. A fluff of green. A little bunny tail. He exhaled steam. His father didn't notice. He promptly saved the image onto his phone. He almost made it into his phone's wallpaper. But then other people could see it. He'd die before he let other people see that image. There was a message attached to it. I hope you're happy, jerk. This might be the happiest he's been since before his mom poured boiling water on his face. He clasped his hands together, thanking whatever higher power brought him to this point in his life. It was almost worth it. All for one mildly sexy picture of Midoriya Izuku's butt. After calming himself, he began to draft a reply. He had so many things he could say. He settled on. I like the bunny tail. It suits you. Needless to say, he was very distracted the rest of the day. And the day after. And also right now. Shoto and Endeavor were patrolling Hosa for the third evening in a row looking for the hero killer, and the sun was just setting behind the city skyline. Hosa was a nice place. Pretty and quiet, other than the whole thing about the hero killer that could be waiting around any corner. That was, until the attack happened. 3 villains had attacked the city, and they were running into the center of it. The description Shoto had heard made his blood go cold, super strong villains with their brains exposed. It was just like Nomo who'd attacked the USJ. There were more? Was the League of Villains behind this as well? Shoto's thoughts were interrupted by his phone, which he had been holding in his hand. It was a message from Midoriya in the class group chat. His location? Shoto furrowed his brow. Why the hell would he? That was in Hosu. That wasn't far. Midoriya wasn't the type to do this randomly. This was a call for help. Endeavor. Shoto called to his father. He copied the location drop and sent it to his father's phone. Handle the villains and send as many pros as you can to this location. He ordered, already turning on his heel to run away. Shoto. Where are you going? His father yelled after him. He shouted back over his shoulder, my friend is in trouble. He was going to save Midoriya. Sometime earlier. Being out in public in his hero costume was a lot more embarrassing than Izuku thought it would be. He pulled his hood up farther over his head, his mouth guard already on and covering the bottom half of his face. He felt like people were staring. To be fair, he was dressed up like a green rabbit, so he couldn't blame them. He had to lean into it. They were on the train, heading to Shibuya. It was finally time for fieldwork. He was just as excited as he was nervous. He pulled out his phone, sending another text to the family group chat about what he was up to. Dad and Yagi both sent him well wishes, and Yagi also gave him some advice about patrolling. He had a text from Todoroki as well. He was heading into Hosa tonight. Endeavor was apparently doing some hero killer hunting. Speaking of Hosu, they'd be passing through it. He thought about Ida. At least Todoroki was going to be in the town for a bit. Maybe they'd see each other? He sent a text to Ida. We're passing by Hosu. I hope your internship is going well. Gran Torino huffed out a laugh. You kids and your phones these days, he said, all the same. I was just texting my dad. And a friend, we're passing through Hosu and he's having his internship here. I just hope he's okay, Izuku said softly. He didn't reply, simply humming as he closed his eyes for a small rest. Izuku looked back down at his phone. Ida had read the message. A few minutes ticked by. Ida always responds within 3 minutes of reading a text. Always. He hadn't yet. Was something wrong? Throbbing pain shot through his head. Shit, he cursed, grabbing his temples. This was danger sense. He could feel it thrumming inside his head and echoing in the void. Kid. Gran Torino sat up, a hand on his shoulder. Kid, what's wrong? Please hold onto your seats. We are currently undergoing an emergency stop, the overhead voice called into the train. The train came to an almost screeching stop, and Izuku was nearly thrown out of his train seat. What is he asked, but before he could finish his sentence his question was answered. A hole had been blown into the side of the train. A hero. Izuku couldn't tell who crashed onto the floor next to him. A large sickly blue hand grabbed his head, crushing it into the metal floor. The smoke cleared and Izuku's stomach dropped. A Nomu stood in the massive hole made in the train. Or something that looked like it. This one though was tall, lankier, and had pale blue skin, but that same exposed brain and dead-eyed look remained. It opened its mouth and let out a horrible noise. A Nomu? Izuku asked, standing in a battle stance. Sit down, kid. A blur of yellow collided with the Nomu, and it and Gran Torino went flying from the train down to the ground. Izuku stood running to the hole. Gran! He yelled before his eyes widened. Smoke rose in the distance. What the hell was going on? This was Hoso, wasn't it? Todoroki. Ida. He jumped out of the train without hesitation, full cowling activated in his body. The difference made by that 4% was amazing. He easily jumped across a few more rooftops until he got closer to where the smoke was, before making his way to the ground. People were screaming and running, and he dodged and weaved through the crowd. Where they were running from must be Site 0. It didn't take long to find. A whole block of the city was destroyed, and there was fire, smoke, and heroes everywhere. And to Izuku's horror, there were 2 more Nomu lookalikes as well. This was bad. If they were even a little bit like Nomu from the USJ, the entire city was in grave danger. Tinya. Izuku's eyes snapped to the hero who called the name. Manuel. That's who Ida is interning with. Where the hell did he run off to at a time like this? Damn it. Tinya. Ida ran off? Straight-laced Ida would never disappear from duty at a time like this. That didn't sound like his friend. Not at all. Why would Hosu? Nomu. League of Villains, the hero killer. Izuku turned on his tail. Think, Izuku. Where would the hero killer be in this mess? What was his motive of operation? One-on-one fights in secluded areas so he could easily kill his targets, but not too secluded so that the body won't be found. He'd stay near the heart of the city then, where most of the alleyways and heroes were. He moved quickly, using his newfound strength to jump up, flying through the air a short distance before landing on a rooftop again. His eyes quickly scanned any place that might fit the description. If only danger sense could tell him where he needed to go. Actually, maybe it could? It would probably alert him to the presence of the hero killer once he was in range. He kept running and looking, and there it was, pain. He stopped. His right eye was throbbing with a familiar sensation. Danger sense. He looked to the right, where a dark alley sat that wasn't too far from where he'd stopped. There. Izuku jumped straight in, flying through the air, and then he saw it, a glint of metal in the darkness lit up by the green electricity of One for All. His heart stopped. The hero killer stain was right over Ida, a sword about to be plunged into his neck. Rage filled him. Who the fuck does he think he is, going after his friends? Smash! Izuku cried. His foot collided with Stain's face, knocking him back several feet, and causing the sword to slip out of his grip. Midoriya. Ida croaked. He hadn't moved from his spot on the ground. Ida. He said, now standing in front of his crumpled body. He wasn't going to let Stain near him ever again. I'm here to save you. He kept his eyes trained on Stain as the man slowly got up. Can you move? We need to get back to a more populated area so the pros can. He cut himself off. There was another person here. A pro hero was slumped against the wall, unconscious. I can't move, Ida said, after he cut me with his blades. I haven't been able to move my body at all. Izuku groaned. Must be his quirk, he said. They mentioned he must have some kind of immobilizing quirk on the news. Did he activate it by cutting you or? Midoriya. Don't get involved. Ida snarled, you have nothing to do with. Oh, shut the fuck up, Ida. Izuku snapped. I'm not leaving you here. Stain laughed, rubbing what should be a nasty bruise on his jaw. A friend yelling, I'm here to save you. That's a nice line. You have a nice friend in Genium. However, I have a duty to complete. If you butt in you'll be killed as well, he said, unsheathing and pointing another sword at him. The false heroes will be called Ingenium? He glanced behind him at Ida. Interesting. And I'm not? Izuku asked. Pain was coursing through his head so sharply. Stain wasn't like the villains at the USJ. This was a killer. A real killer. But Izuku felt too angry to be scared. He had to keep him talking, stall for time. He reached behind himself, grabbing his phone. What makes me different from them? Not because I'm a child, right? Ida and I are the same age. I'm actually a month older, he joked. He fumbled in his messages. He was pretty sure he was in the class group chat. He shared his location, before pocketing his phone. One of them would get help. Todoroki was nearby, right? This doesn't concern you. Ida yelled again. Please just go. This is my fight. Please, Midoriya. And I said shut up. He yelled back at him, eyes never leaving Stain. A hero's job is putting his nose where it doesn't belong. All Might said that to me once. Stain grinned, pointing to Izuku. That's exactly why I don't want to kill you. You just said it yourself. You might just make it, he said, so I'll give you one last chance. He pulled out another sword from his back. Run now with your tail tucked between your legs, and let me finish my work. He readied himself for an attack. Shit. Izuku had to knock him out as fast as possible, then get Ida and the other pro away. Full cowling exploded around his body. 10%. He jumped forward. Don't let him cut you. He heard from behind him. I know. Izuku called back, bracing his arms in front of his face as danger sense sent pain up between his eyes. He activated shield, which took the hit from the sword. Stain's eyes widened. Izuku dropped shield, and used pull to bring Stain's face into his fist before punching him away again. That was good, Stain said. He held a sword in one hand, a dagger in the other. When did he pull that out? But not quite good enough to stand up to blood curdle. Izuku watched as he moved his hand and brought the dagger to his lips and licked it. His body seized. He couldn't move. Why couldn't he? Then he saw it. His arm, right in the open space on his shoulder, had been grazed, breaking the skin. He crumpled to the floor, drinking blood to stop his victims. Gross. Sorry, you have to see this, hero. Maybe avert your eyes. He turned towards Ida. I have work to finish. He walked to him, holding up his sword once more. Izuku grit his teeth trying to get himself to move. Please. Wait, don't. He called to Stain. Stop it. Fire filled the alleyway. Stain jumped away from Ida as the flames extended over him, reflecting everywhere with beautiful colors, red, orange, and yellow that faded into burning hot blue flames. They died as their user stepped into the fray. Relief flooded him. They were saved. Todoroki was here. Midoriya, he said, holding up his phone. He was wearing his new hero costume. Blue, tighter cut, shorter sleeves. It was simple, but it looked angelic here in this alley. Maybe because Izuku was just so happy to see him. You really need to send more information at a time like this. I was almost late. Shadow put his phone in his back pocket, glad that he made it in time. His eyes quickly scanned the scene. Ida, Midoriya, and an unconscious pro he was fairly certain it was native all lay on the ground in front of him. In all his father's briefings, it was disclosed that Stain had some sort of immobilizing quirk. This was proof of that. Endeavor's teachings sprang to mind. Civilians first. Or in this case, the victims. He stepped forward with his right foot. Eyes shot out from him. He reminded himself less was more. He didn't want another Zero situation. He pushed Stain further away and used the ice to lift Midoriya and Native up so they would slide down behind him. You're here. Midoriya cried, landing just behind his legs. Took me a moment to figure out what you meant. Stain was back on the approach. He sent another torrent of flames, letting it burn around his skin hotly. You're not the type to send your location without any meaning. It was a distress signal. I sent it along. The pros should be here soon. Midoriya gave a soft sigh of relief. We just need to hold on then. Todoroki-kun, be careful. I'm certain if he ingests your blood orally he'll be able to freeze you. I'll just have to keep my distance. A blade sword gracefully passed his face, grazing his cheek. He felt the dribble of blood slide down it. Watch out. Stain was on top of him. He moved fast. Shadow summoned more of his fire, forcing him to back off. You've got some very good friends, Ingenium. Stain taunted, landing in a back handspring before settling in a crouched position. Please. Ida's voice was soft at his feet. Please stop. Both of you. I inherited my brother's name. I'm the one who has to end this. This is my fight. You inherited it, hey? Shadow asked, unleashing another wave of ice. That's funny. The Ingenium I knew never made a face like that. But I guess you have stuff going on behind closed doors in your family too, hey? His ice was shattered. Damn, those blades are strong. Stain jumped through the shards of ice. Shadow tried to prepare another shot of fire, but 3 throwing knives embedded themselves in his arm. He let out a small grunt of pain, blood spilling onto the floor. Stain had shot himself into the air, and his blade aimed down. Shadow readied himself to counter, but Stain had other plans, going for the unconscious native next to him. He had to stop him. A green blur whizzed past him. Midoriya was moving again. He used his shield to take a hit from Stain, before grabbing him by the red fabric he had draped around his neck. In a smooth motion, Midoriya pulled him further from him and the others, before slamming Stain into the ground. Something had changed with Midoriya. He was moving faster than normal, and his hits seemingly did more damage. Midoriya! He cried, gripping his bleeding arm. You're up. I dunno why, he yelled back, jumping out of the way as Shadow sent more ice to push Stain away further. Midoriya landed at Shadow's side. I was the last down but the first up. Shadow hummed in thought, his eyes trained on the hero killer. He hadn't moved yet. Time limit. I have 3 ideas. A. It gets weaker the more people he has under his control. B. It depends on the amount ingested since he only got a few drops of mine. Or C. It depends on blood type. I have O. Same, Shadow said. A. Ida said quietly. Stain finally stood, and gave them a little clap. You're quite smart, he said to Midoriya. I like you so I'll give you this. You're right. It's blood type. O type in particular doesn't last long, but B, AB, and A, are easier. Any backlash? Midoriya asked. The hero killer laughed. None that I've encountered. I'm not sure what my limit is. I never needed to freeze so many people before. Midoriya made a soft humming noise. That's good to know, thank you. Todoroki-kun, I have a plan. Shadow stood up straighter as if he'd just been shocked. Midoriya's quirk. You're not going to, he cut himself off. It wasn't a bad idea. That would practically win the fight. If Stain didn't have any backlash then. I'll help. We're going to protect them. Together, he said, just tell me what you need me to do. I'll get in close. You stay back, be my support. You're losing a lot of blood. Shadow nodded and sent more ice as Midoriya jumped back into the fray. Shadow tried to remember their talk that morning before school. All 5 fingers usually to the face. That was their win condition. Ida might see, but this was life or death. Who knows how long it would take for the pros to show up. And quite frankly, he didn't know if they had that kind of time. He was bleeding. A lot. Why? Ida asked from behind them, why are you doing this? It's what heroes do, Shadow said, sending an ice wall between Midoriya and Stain. Midoriya easily climbed over it to get the jump on Stain, but he responded with a blade one Midoriya was able to block with his shield. This is my fight, he wheezed, I have to be the one. Shadow grit his teeth. He was in pain and didn't have the time for Ida to be whining. He understood, at least in concept, what he must feel like. Feeling helpless. But damn it, so stand the fuck up. He yelled, if you want to fight, stand up. Shit. Stain had managed to sneak past Midoriya, his blade drawn. Xiaodo sent more fire blasts, but he was already so close. The strength he was putting into this slash, it looked like he was about to sever his left arm. He couldn't move fast enough. Ida blew past him, knocking into Stain with such force that he skidded along the ground. Perfect, Ida. Thank you. Midoriya cried. He descended on Stain like a dog, his right hand touching his face. All 5 fingers pressed down. He wasn't sure what happened, but the hero killer's eyes widened. He swung his sword, slicing Midoriya across the bridge of his nose, and kicked him in the chest, sending him back. He brought the bloody blade to his lips, his tongue sliding over it. Ida was yelling, but nothing happened. Midoriya was on his feet again, moving just fine. Why is he still moving? Ida asked. What did you do? What did you do? Stain asked Midoriya, horror on his face. He snarled and came down for another swing. Midoriya put up his hands to summon shield, but it wasn't fast enough. Stain sliced into him, cutting through his costume. Whatever it was made of, however, took most of the hit. He was bleeding, but not deeply. Ida ran again, his leg colliding with Stain's chest. Xiaodo could hear the crack of his ribs from here. Midoriya held his hand out towards Xiaodo. The dagger, the one that had cut his cheek and flown past him, landed delicately in Midoriya's waiting hand. He quickly wiped the blood on his sleeve and got to work. Stain and Ida were fighting. Stain had gotten back up, his sword coming down for a swing. It shattered on Ida's shin guard. Xiaodo was having a hard time moving, the effects of the blood loss making itself known. Midoriya, on the other hand, was not. He threw the dagger. Stain, who'd been so wrapped up in his fight with Ida, couldn't dodge it in time, and it cut his face. Midoriya held out his hand, calling the knife back to him. Midoriya caught the blade and lifted it to his mouth. Stain dropped to the ground. I can't. He struggled, but his body was unable to move. I can't move. What? Midoriya wiped his face, his own blood pouring down his cheek. Glad to see I can't freeze myself. Thanks for the information on your quirk. You won't be needing it anymore. Izuku threw the bloody dagger onto the ground. It tasted disgusting. He could feel the hum of blood curdle inside him. That was what the hero killer had called it, right? Now that Stain was out of commission, he could feel the adrenaline fade from his body. What Midoriya did you just how? Ida asked. Very long story, he said. I promise I'll tell you later, but right now, we need to get out of the alley. Bring Stain. Do we have some rope? Todoroki nodded. There's probably some cord or something in the trash, he said, slowly walking towards the dumpster at the front of the alley. He was gripping his left arm. There is. He called, grabbing handfuls of it. Izuku and Ida got to work, tying him up. There, Izuku said quietly, he can't get away now. He turned to Ida. Can you carry native? He asked. Of course, he said and grabbed the fallen pro. Izuku lifted the hero killer over his shoulder with ease. Don't worry, Izuku said to him quietly. We'll get you to a hospital soon. They'll be able to help you. I think Ida broke your ribs. Stain laughed. Worrying about me? I'm just a simple and lowly villain. Izuku snorted. So? He asked him, even villains are still people. You deserve to be healthy. Behind bars, don't get me wrong, you need to answer for your crimes. You killed a lot of people. I called false heroes. Cool motive, still murder, he said with a laugh. Izuku set him down at the edge of the alley away from native. You know there are better ways to change the world than murder, right? Stain closed his eyes, now propped up against the cold brick of the building. I used to do vigilante work. It did not work out, he sighed. All it got me was a lot of wasted time and a broken face. I didn't exactly have the quirk for hero work. He rolled his eyes and crouched down. That's bullshit, he said. It's a great quirk for hero work. Being able to stop your opponent from moving with just a little bit of blood? It's perfect for at least underground hero work. It's like my homeroom teacher's quirk, or like my friend, well, not my friend yet, but I'm working on him, who has a brainwashing quirk. They're fantastic. He looked back to Stain. The system has gaps. Unfortunately, you fell in one. I'm sorry for that. Why are you apologizing? Because I'm part of that system. I know being a hero isn't all glitz and glamour, and beating up the bad guys. I do want to help change the system. I don't know how just yet. But I know I'm going to. Stain at him, as if reading his soul. You really are something else. Before Izuku could say anything else, Todoroki called to him. Midoriya. He turned and walked over to his friends, keeping Stain in the corner of his eye. Are you all right? Todoroki asked softly, his hand gently cupping his cheek. His face felt so warm. Izuku's heart rate picked up. You're bleeding. I'm fine, he said, enjoying the feeling of touching his crush. All my cuts are pretty shallow. Your arm looks pretty bad though. What about you, Ida? Todoroki moved his hand. Izuku wished he hadn't. Stain got my arm badly before you arrived, he said softly. I'm so sorry to you both. That was. I don't know why I put myself in this situation. Izuku took Ida by his uninjured hand. It's okay. People do insane things sometimes when emotions run high. We're all alive and safe now. That's what matters. Some pros will be here soon, so don't worry. Nothing bad will happen now. He let him go and moved to walk towards Stain again. Ida and Todoroki's eyes widened. Mido, Todoroki called, but Izuku stopped hearing him. Talons had wrapped around his chest, and he was going up. He froze, struggling in the grip of his captor. He looked up. Ainomo had him. Big wings flapped as Izuku went up higher and higher. He looked back down at the ground. He had to get away, he had to get down before he go too high. A sword flew through the air, stabbing Nomu in the leg near Izuku's head. Stain was up, he was moving. He'd managed to cut through the cords they'd binded him with. Hero! He called, jumping into the air. Izuku grabbed the sword, pulling it out into his lips. The Nomu froze, the grip on him loosening. He broke free. But he was falling to the ground. Suddenly Stain had him, hugging him to his chest. They fell together. Stain landed on his back, rolling them a few times. He'd absorbed most of the shock from the fall. Izuku now lay on top of him, the Nomu a few feet behind them. Kid. Gran Torino called. Izuku looked up. Gran was leading the pack of a small group of pros. Izuku moved to get up, but Stain held him tightly. He sat up, cradling Izuku in his arms, pressing him to his chest with a grip so tight that he couldn't escape. He found he couldn't even activate his quirks. He was frozen in fear. The aura radiating from Stain was palpable. Bloodlust. Holy shit. A pro called. Is that the hero killer? He has a kid. Stain's voice was raspy but loud. It was like cold water pouring down Izuku's head. He could smell his breath. Rotten, the metallic scent of blood filled his nose, the false heroes that have overrun society. Villains who only wish to destroy. Those are my targets. Everything I do is for a just world. He cried, we need more like this one. His hand carted through Izuku's hair, almost lovingly. He felt ill. Let go of me, he said, attempting to push away from him. Did he save that kid from the villain? More like took a hostage. Todoroki's voice shook. Midoriya. The worst person had entered the fray. Anyone but him. Ah. That's what you were doing, Shouto, Endeavor called, his mouth turning into a wide grin. His flames burned brighter. Izuku curled closer to Stain on instinct. Wait, Gran Torino yelled Todoroki. Another phony, Stain said, slowly standing. He put Izuku behind him on the ground. The fakes must be killed. Someone must stain himself in their blood. I'll restore the meaning of the word hero. He took a step forward. The only one who can kill me is All Might, he yelled. Izuku closed his eyes. Waiting for the fight. For the flames. For Stain to move. But it never came. Stain was stopped dead in his tracks. All of the pros Endeavor included were frozen to their spots. All held captive by his words. But Stain never moved. He had fallen unconscious, standing through the strength of his conviction. Alright, that's where we'll leave off for the day. Thanks so much for listening along with me today. If you enjoyed, please like and comment down below and check out the video or playlist on the screen for more content from me. I look forward to seeing you next time. Ciao for now, lovelies.